Hey everyone, welcome to Rock the Capitol, Legislative Advocacy Skills for the CASA Network in Texas. We're so glad you're here, whether you're on a legislative advocacy team or you're considering it. Legislative advocacy is simple. It's about building relationships and communicating effectively with legislators to enact the best policies and practices for Texas children and families. In this training, you're going to learn why and how to be a legislative advocate, all about being on a legislative advocacy team, or LAT for short, cool new skills, whether it's sending an email about a bill or visiting an elected official, and finally, at the end of the video, you'll see a live visit from a LAT member to a representative at the Texas Capitol, so you can learn exactly what happens. Everything from this training will help you learn to build relationships and communicate effectively with your legislator so we can work together to transform the child welfare system in Texas for the better.
Being a legislative advocate takes your involvement with CASA to the next level. As a CASA volunteer, you work to change the lives of children and families every day. That first-hand experience advocating for the needs of children and families in the child welfare system gives you a unique perspective in how that system can be improved. Being a legislative advocate means being able to change the lives of tens of thousands of people touched by the child welfare system every year. Every legislator has a CASA volunteer in their district, and that's what makes the legislative advocacy team so powerful. Hearing first-hand accounts of the child welfare system from their own constituents is the most powerful way to convey policy information to legislators.
I had no political bone in my body up to that point, so I had no clue what I was getting into, but of course you say yes because you're a volunteer anyway. So that's how I got into the legislative advocacy.
This is a powerful role because we're a voice, and without us, I'm not sure that voice would be there. We are CASA's first, and so we know the importance of our role because we know that the work that we're doing to change public policy it'll first help our CASAs, our fellow CASAs, but it also helps the kids that are in the foster care system. Also though, legislators hear from public policy teams all day long in Austin. They want to hear from their constituents.
Legislators trust CASA volunteers because they do not have a hidden agenda. You are unpaid volunteers whose recommendations are founded in your direct experience with the child welfare system. CASA volunteers are in Texas courts every day, and as a result, they have powerful frontline experience to share. That's why people trust the voice of CASA volunteers. They have nothing to gain except for a better world for children and families.
The power of the role of being a legislative advocate is gaining an understanding of what is actually taking place at the state level to improve kids' current experience and their overall outcomes, because it's a long-term look at how, and hopefully every legislative year there will be more programs in place, more opportunities to improve kids' lives. So the power is that we're helping with that process.
There is no one way a legislative advocacy team needs to look. They can be big or small, 30 people or 3. Legislative advocacy teams are typically a mix of volunteers and CASA program staff. It's important for legislative advocacy teams to coordinate with their local program leadership. That's why having a staff person actively involved with the legislative advocacy team can streamline that coordination.
Okay, so my role as a legislative advocate was again to lead the legislative advocacy team there in the Amarillo office. So what I did was organize monthly meetings, sent out agendas, took the meeting notes actually, and made sure those were sent to all the advocates that were on board. Ordered the meals, because every one of the meetings we made sure we had kind of a family meal type setting, which is really helpful. So primarily just kind of making sure the team was continued to be together and identifying each individual's strength to help make the team stronger and our advocacy stronger for the kiddos. I've learned as a legislative advocate the power that a team has to promote outcomes for kids. To talk with legislators, again, this was not something that I was prone to do. So it was an interesting process for me and a powerful process getting with a team that had such creativity and such heart for the work. So in presenting that heart to legislators who have a heart too, and helping promote that. Well, part of our team in particular, because the Amarillo area, we have 4 legislators. So one person connecting with 4 legislators and knowing all the information on how to do that. What the team did, or does, is provide more vision, bigger vision, more creativity based on their experiences, even their stories with their kids, and how they might approach something, so that we've got a bigger vision of how we can manage what we want to do and make it more powerful by using all the individual skills. Our team in particular, we had 8 team members. We had 4 legislators. So one of the first things, and most of these aren't my ideas, but because of the team, somebody said, what if we divide up and each of us, 2 of us together, connect with one of the legislators and present the bullet points based on their particular, because we had 7 counties and each of the counties has kind of different issues. So based on which legislator they had, that would determine kind of what their bullet points might be for the legislation coming up and have that conversation with them.
How Texas CASA supports legislative advocacy teams. Legislative advocacy teams are never out there alone. Texas CASA is supporting you every step of the way. We hold big events every year, and you're invited. First, we hold an annual child welfare primer where we do a deep dive into important and emerging policy issues. We also host a LAT retreat every summer before the legislative session. It's an exciting day of training where legislative advocates from all over Texas come to Austin to build their skills and further their team's advocacy. The LAT retreat helps to ensure that everyone is ready for the important work that will happen during the next legislative session. And finally, we have CASA Day at the Capitol, which happens every legislative session.
So at the very, very beginning of the session, we have a LAT retreat where they give an overview of all of their legislative priorities. Then we have the CASA Day at the Capitol where we get more in detail with our legislators. Throughout the entire session, we go through a process where we have telephone conferences with the public policy team. And so at every step of the way, they are guiding us. They even give us emails and telephone numbers to contact them. And it's not like the typical telephone and email that you get, where you may get a response back in a week or 2. This legislative session, I've sent several emails and I'll get a response back in an hour or 2. They do everything they can to make sure that we are successful.
CASA Day at the Capitol is one of the most exciting days during the legislative session. Anyone can come from any CASA program across Texas. We show up in CASA Blue, visit legislators in their offices, and walk the halls of the Capitol. It's extremely powerful. We get to see each other, share stories, and see the huge number of other volunteers all working towards the same cause across the state. Most importantly, legislators get to see the huge breadth of our volunteer base and really understand the power of CASA. In addition to our big events, Texas CASA coordinates the LATs so we can speak in one voice with a shared message, sets a policy agenda by listening to CASA volunteers, staff, and other stakeholders across Texas, sends out legislative action alerts so you can support bills in real time and know what's going on during the legislative session, and finally, gives you background and insight on each legislator to help determine the best approach to working with them. What we do depends on the year. Are we in session or out of session? What year is it? During the interim, in the even-numbered years, you learn about the ever-changing child welfare system and current policy issues. Visit with your legislators in town and build relationships. Give input to Texas CASA on legislative priorities for the next session. Attend the LAT retreat and communicate with your local program about what is happening during the interim. During the legislative session, in odd-numbered years, you meet with your legislators in your town or in Austin, ask legislators to support Texas CASA policy priorities, attend CASA Day at the Capitol, respond to legislative action alerts, give testimony at legislative committee hearings, and communicate back to your local program about what is happening during the session.
The things that I've done this session as a legislative advocate was I did attend the LAT retreat at the very beginning of the session. I attended the CASA Day at the Capitol. Soon after that, I began meeting with the legislative staff back in the district. I took them out to lunch and I met with legislative staff up in the Capitol. And it was very important for me to meet with the staff because once the session begins, it's very difficult to meet with a legislator. So the more the staff knows you, the more successful you can be. And so once we did that, I started meeting with legislators about our priorities for our LAT. And I would prepare the monthly newsletter to keep our organization in the know. I would give presentations or attend events back in the district. And then as the legislation, when we would get bill alerts, I would send all of the bill alerts out to our team to contact our legislators. And as the session was closing, as it was finished, I was responsible for preparing an overview of what we accomplished and giving a presentation to the board of directors. Now that the session is finished, our job is not over. Just yesterday, one of our legislators in Fort Bend County had a meeting and he was going over everything that he accomplished. And so I attended that meeting, and one of the things that he said was what he did for Child Advocates LAT. And it made me wonder, if I was present, would he have mentioned us? I don't know, but it's very important that we remember that although the legislative session is over, in the interim, our jobs still continue.
So how do we do it? Let's talk about the important skills for legislative advocacy: communicating with your legislators and building relationships. We communicate with legislators 3 ways: in-person meetings, email, and phone calls. In-person meetings are the best way to build relationships with your legislator and their staff. This foundation will be critical when you're reaching out to them to convey information during session. During the legislative session, email is the primary vehicle for communicating with the legislator and their staff. When Texas CASA sends an action alert asking you to send information to your legislator and their staff, we will provide you with the contact information as well as suggested content. Legislative action alerts usually have to be sent to the legislative offices in 24 to 72 hours. Be sure to personalize the emails to make them relevant to your legislator and their district. The more personalized an email, the more powerful the message will be. If you email a legislator directly, expect to get an automated response. That's why it's a best practice to copy the relevant staff person on the email. Texas CASA will provide you with all the correct contact information for the legislator and their staff. As soon as bills are posted for a committee hearing, we want to reach out to the committee members to let them know why we care about the bill. We let them know why we support the bill and what issue we feel it's trying to address. When we send an action alert, we send it through a legislative advocacy team that is represented by a member of that committee. The action alert will say something like, "Hey, this bill is being heard in a committee and you're represented by a member of that committee." The email will include the contact information for that legislator and for their relevant staff, as well as a summary of what the bill does and the issue we feel that it's trying to address. Then we include language that you might want to use in your email to the legislator.
I go back and I take these bill alerts and I send them out to 10 people, and those 10 people send it out to 20 people. And that's not only being done in Fort Bend County, that's being done across the state of Texas. And so when you extrapolate that across the state of Texas, think about how powerful that is.
Sometimes bills get caught up in the House Calendars Committee. After a bill passes out of its committee of origin, it has to go through the House Calendars Committee before it can be set on a calendar to be heard by the full House. So sometimes we do email alerts to the members of the House Calendars Committee to let them know it's important that this bill get the chance to be heard by the full House. Once a bill passes out of the House, we repeat the process all over again in the Senate. Remember, it's important to thank legislators for taking action on a bill when we send out action alerts. Sometimes we will ask you to send out thank you emails to your legislators. As with action alerts, we'll provide you language that you can use in any of these emails.
Yeah, we responded to legislative alerts. Texas CASA would send out kind of what's coming up in the legislature. They actually identify which one of the representatives we should be contacting to let them know to promote this particular bill that's coming up, and give them information regarding what the reason would be to promote that legislation. And I think it's probably really hard to say no to things that are helping the lives of kids, so it was a pretty easy sell.
The other method you might think to use is the phone. The phone call is primarily used to set up a meeting or to determine which staff person is working on a particular issue. Don't be surprised if the person you speak with asks you to follow up the phone call with an email. Don't take it personally. It's important for legislators who are extremely busy to have an electronic version of the request that you just made over the phone. Having an electronic version of the request makes it easier for them to ensure they send you everything that you requested. If you're meeting when the legislature is not in session, it's more likely that you will be able to meet with the legislator themselves. During the legislative session or election season, expect to have less time with the staff and less or no time with the legislator unless you have a long-standing relationship. That is why those in-person meetings during the quiet months are so critical. So once you have a meeting on the books, what's next? You want to get prepared. Practice asking for the action you want the legislator to take. Decide which brief, relevant CASA story you will tell. Bring materials to leave with your legislator. Be flexible the day of the meeting, and remember to say thank you. Legislative schedules change with little or no notice. Make sure you're flexible and patient. Know that your meeting getting moved is not a reflection of the importance of your visit with them. You may meet with legislative staff instead of the legislator themselves. This is not an insult to you or CASA. Informed staff are critical to policy development. At the beginning of the meeting, clarify with the legislator or staff how much time they have so you can tailor your talking points to fit the time.
Developing relationships with legislators, the first thing you have to do is kind of decide what you want to present. So you have to inform yourself. You have to be the best informed person in the room. You know, Thomas Jefferson said, I don't have to be the smartest man in the room, I have to be the one that has the most information. So that was kind of what we decided. We need to have good information. And then the first thing you have to do is make a call. And usually you'll get the legislator's assistant, which is fine because they usually probably know more about what's going on. So then you'll set up an appointment, get with us. Again, it was a team of two. So I would get with my team member, we'd talk about who's going to present the information, what information is presented, and how we'll introduce ourselves. And again, identify, be respectful, and make sure everything we're doing is kind of related to the task at hand. And what we found was every time we did that, we were told it would be kind of a 15-minute meet. Usually we ended up in there about 30 minutes at least because the legislators were interested in what we were saying. How can you not be interested in what's going to help the most, well, the kids who have the most need and who are least served.
Let's get a little deeper into how to tell your personal story. There's no one way to tell a personal story, but there are some best practices to keep in mind. Keep your story concise and practice. Relating a personal story is a powerful way to illustrate the value of CASA, but don't spend so long telling your personal story that you can't get around to the main point of the visit. The best way to perfect your story is to practice beforehand. Practice the way you would before giving a toast at a wedding. Keep cases confidential. A powerful personal story contains details, but do not provide so many details that someone who's not directly involved with the case would know which case you're talking about. Make the ask. Tell the legislator exactly what you need from them. Don't be shy, they need this information. And please follow the Texas CASA policy priorities when having these conversations. Bring hard copy materials. Be sure to bring hard copies of all of the materials you'll be discussing during the meeting. That way, the legislator and their staff will have an accurate representation of what you talked about. And if the meeting ends abruptly, they can walk away with all the information you hope to share with them. These should be short handouts with easy to understand bullet points and no more than 2 pages. Follow up with a letter or email. Follow up with a letter or email thanking the legislator and their staff for taking the time to meet with you. It's always good to express a little gratitude. Keep building the relationship. After your meeting, continue building the relationship with your legislator and their staff. If they have events, attend them. If you have events, be sure to include them. If they cannot come, they will typically send staff in their place. Remember, the CASA message is not difficult for people to be excited about.
Texas CASA's role with all of the CASAs and ours in particular has been to, again, train us in how to present ourselves to legislators, help us design our own speeches, our little elevator speeches, 30-second, 1-minute speeches, so that when we had just a short time with the legislator, we could quickly let them know kind of what we were thinking about and what they could help us promote. If you're able to make it to the Texas CASA training prior to the next legislative session, that would be a great thing to do because it will make everything predictable for you. They will walk you through when you hit CASA Day at the Capitol, this is what it'll look like. This is how you can go into the offices, this is how you can present yourself. During the session, they'll be sending email updates about where the bills are currently in process. And let you know who to contact in particular based on that particular bill to help promote that. And then all along the way, I mean, I was in contact with Texas CASA via phone. When I would send them kind of what we were going to do so that we would get some feedback on, well, if you tweak this a little bit or maybe you want to promote this. So they were really helpful in kind of guiding the process for us and making us go in there well prepared.
Meeting with a legislator. Now we are excited to show you a model interaction for a visit at the Texas Capitol. Elisa DeLuna of CASA of Travis County met with Representative James White in his office. Make sure to pay close attention to what Elisa says and does and how Representative White responds. In this model interaction, we are looking for a concise personal CASA story, keeping the case confidential, a clear ask based on the Texas CASA policy priorities, and materials to leave with the representative.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Representative White. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Ms. DeLuna. And how can I help the great folks at CASA?
Really want to sit down and talk to you about some of the things we have going on.
Please, please.
So first thing is first, I want to talk about funding if we can.
Yes, please. You got to have the cash.
We have
Yes,
to have the funding in order
Yes,
to
ma'am.
make sure to support our volunteers.
Yes, ma'am.
So last legislative session, we were funded with right around $13 million in the biennium, and what we're looking for is $15.5 million this
Yes.
year to support making sure that we can reach all of the children that need a volunteer. We're at right about 55% coverage in the state, but that's not good enough.
Right.
We need to reach the rest of the children, and so if we can get allocated that $2.5 million more, that would be amazing. And I have some information here that I can leave for you afterwards.
Please do. I mean, because I'm going to tell you, Ms. DeLuna, $2.5 million, you stated, is every dollar of taxpayer money is very, very important. The work that CASA performs and sort of the benefit that we get from CASA, they're all volunteers, $2.5 million, hundreds of more young folks being nurtured and helped as they're going through this foster care system. This is money well spent.
Thank you for recognizing that so much, and we want to give you all that you need to make sure that you can communicate that to your fellow representatives whenever you need to. So we'll leave you with some information, and then obviously whenever you need anything, you can contact us or those at Texas CASA that can help you out as well.
We will.
So the second issue is one that I think has been brought up in several legislative sessions, but it's so important, you know, to our youth in particular, and that is the age in which they are prosecuted as adults and then housed in our prison system as adults. And so sometimes we have youth who are in the system at 17 who end up with adults. And our youth have gone through so much trauma, and for them, they are experiencing life at half their age. You know, it's like putting an 8 or a 9-year-old in with adults in jail and in prison. And that's really tough for us to do the work that we need to do. So I would also like to ask and see what we can do about making sure that we raise that age to 18.
Raise the age of criminal responsibility to 18 from 17. I've been a strong supporter of that. It hurts me as an American citizen.
Well, we'd certainly appreciate any support that we can get on that.
Got it.
We have many other priorities, and I know
Yes.
that you have such little time.
Yes,
So I
ma'am.
do have some information to leave here for you, and
Yes,
any
ma'am.
questions that you or your staff have for us, please feel free to reach out. I have my card in there. I have members of the Texas CASA's contact information in there. Or do you have any questions for us that you want answered right now?
Well, not right now, but we do want to reiterate that we love CASA, we love the people of CASA, and we love them because most importantly, they love our young kids back home, especially those children that are in very, very tough situations, and we love the volunteers that are associated with CASA. So we're always ready with our hands held out to go to work for the great cause of CASA.
Well, thank you so much again for agreeing to meet with us. I cannot tell you how much it means to us.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
we're here to be at your service for any questions that you all have as we go through session.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Saul, thank you so
Yeah.
much. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, not at all.
And as a token of appreciation, we want to leave you with this notebook.
Oh, great, thank you.
We know you're going to take a lot of notes, so hope that's
Oh,
useful
yeah.
for you.
No problem. Thank you for coming by.
Take care.
If you are a part of a legislative advocacy team, thank you. If you're considering it, jump right in. If you have any questions, please contact Texas CASA. We would love to talk to you about being more involved. Keep fighting the good fight for Texas children and families. Public policy at texascasa.org.